All right, good afternoon. As you know, the Security Council just met on Syria, was briefed by Stéphane de Mistura, the Secretary General Special Envoy. I won't go into what he said because I know he just spoke to you at the stakeout a few minutes ago. We do expect the Council to reconvene this afternoon at 3 o'clock on a resolution on Syria. And the Council will then also be receiving a briefing from Said Jinnit, the Secretary General Special Envoy for the Great Lakes region. A number of senior personnel announcements to announce today. The Secretary General is appointing Virginia Gamba of Argentina as his special representative for children in armed conflict. As you know, Ms. Gamba brings to the job more than 30 years of experience and leadership. The next appointment is that of Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, which will go to Pramila Paten of Mauritius. Ms. Patton is a practicing barrister of law and has served since 2003 as a member of the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And the third one is the High Representative for Least Developed, Landlocked Developing Countries and Small Island Developing States. The Secretary General has selected Fekitamoeloa Katoa Utoikamamunu of Tonga, who since 2017 is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ministry of Tourism in Tonga. And we have more information on the biography of all the people we've just announced. And also today, the Secretary General is announcing the members of the independent panel to assess and enhance the effectiveness of UN Habitat, and that follows the adoption of the new urban agenda, the latest Habitat conference. And this is a part of the follow-up of the Habitat 3 conference. The Secretary General was requested to submit an evidence-based and independent assessment of UN Habitat to the General Assembly in its 71st session. This high-level panel will be in charge of that assessment. It's composed of 8 members and reports directly to the Secretary General. A full list of the appointees is available in my office. And from South Sudan, the UN mission in that country reports that a UN patrol of peacekeepers returned to PAJOK in eastern Equatoria this morning after a first visit yesterday. You'll remember that the patrol had been prevented from assessing PAJOK last week. It reached its destination yesterday and was able to visit several areas of the town, meeting with community leaders, members of the Sudan People's Liberation Army, and peacekeepers observed that PAJOK was highly militarized and with a limited civilian presence. As we get more information from what the patrols observed, we will try to share that with you. Meanwhile, the mission also tells us that the security situation is currently stable in Wau in western Bahr el Ghazal following incidents of violence last week. Yesterday, UN peacekeepers conducted 2 patrols in the town, observed civilians on the main road with little military presence. The UN mission is also engaged with the state and leadership of the SPLA to exercise restraint. The mission reports that 465 civilians arrived at the protection area adjacent to the UN base on Monday night, bringing a total of more than 25,000 people, civilians who are being protected by peacekeepers, UN peacekeepers in that site. And our colleagues at OCHA also tell us that an interagency emergency directors team is currently in South Sudan. Yesterday they traveled to Wau and Mayendit in unity, and today they're meeting with government officials, humanitarian partners, and the diplomatic community. Prior to South Sudan, the directors were in Somalia, where they held discussions with the Prime Minister and with impacted populations in Mogadishu, Baidoa, and Kismayo. They are scheduled to brief you here at noon on Monday, and that will be led by our good colleague John Ging. And our humanitarian colleagues in Iraq tell us that as fighting continues in West Mosul, 8 partners continue to respond to rising casualty and displacement. They're also providing assistance to families in newly accessible areas. Nearly 17,000 people who've been injured have been received near the front lines, with more than 6,300 injured people having been referred to hospitals around Mosul since the start of the military operations there in October. Since late February, 292,000 people have been forced to flee West Mosul, with 362,000 people uprooted by fighting in both East and West Mosul. To date, emergency aid packages have been distributed to help 1.9 million people inside Mosul and surrounding areas. For its part, UNHCR has opened up a new camp in Hammam el-Alil to house thousands of newly displaced people fighting the western area of Mosul. The first 500 families began arriving today at the site, which has 2,500 tents to house more than 15,000 people. When construction is completed, the camp will have a capacity of up to 30,000 people. And the World Food Programme announced today that it is scaling up its emergency food operations in Yemen to provide food assistance to up to 9 million people in one of the world's worst hunger crises. The new emergency operation will cost up to $1.2 billion over a one-year period and should allow WFP to gradually scale up assistance to feed all severely food insecure people in Yemen every month. The success of this operation hinges on immediate sufficient resources from donors. In April and May, and until WFP can secure the funds it needs, it will prioritize 6.7 million people. Somebody's listening to something. Sorry, some other audio. Thank you. During April and May, until WFP can secure the funds it needs, it will prioritize 6.7 million people for urgent food assistance, some 2.5 million of them, particularly those in governorates hard hit by the food insecurity and at risk of slipping into famine. They will receive a package of assistance aimed at averting a famine. And our colleagues at UNICEF say that the number of children used in suicide attacks in the Lake Chad conflict has surged to 27 in the first quarter of 2017, compared to 9 in the same period last year. UNICEF said in a new report released today, the increase reflects an alarming tactic by insurgents. So far, 117 children have been used to carry out bomb attacks in public places across Nigeria, Chad, Niger, and Cameroon since 2013. Girls have been used in the vast majority of these attacks. The report also highlights the challenges the local authorities face with children taken into administrative custody for questioning, screening, raising concerns about the prolonged periods of custody. Just to give you an idea, in 2016, almost 1,500 children were under administrative custody across those 4 countries. And back here this morning, Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, Jeff Feltman, briefed member states in a meeting convened by the President of the General Assembly on the new report by the Secretary General on implementing the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy. That report was released and put up on the website late yesterday. Mr. Feltman, in his remarks, underscored that the evolving terrorist threat, together with the increased mandates and demands from member states and subsequent scope of work, are the main reason to change the way the UN counterterrorism assistance is institutionally structured. He noted that the Secretary General considers that enhancing the UN leadership on counterterrorism, strengthening coordination and coherence in the delivery of UN assistance to member states, and increasing our impact on the ground is indeed crucial. And the full report is online, and his intervention was webcast as well. And UNICEF and UNHCR today welcomed a new set of guidelines from the European Commission to protect migrants and refugee children. The guidelines cover issues such as the appointment of guardians for children, boosting child protection, and ensuring there are alternatives to detention for children and their families. And from Zambia, I think you, Matthew, had raised the question about the issues, and I can say that we're following developments in the country. We're not in a position to fully establish the facts, but hope that due process and an impartial investigation into the events will take place. Zambia has made great strides in consolidating its democracy and has a tradition of peaceful transition of power. Differences should be addressed through constructive and inclusive dialogue to further advance on the path to sustainable peace and development. Today, we say thank you to our friends in Kazakhstan, who have paid their regular budget dues, who brings us up to 80. There you go. All right. Matthew, go ahead.
I'll ask you 2 things. One, I'm sure you've seen the AP investigative story about sexual abuse through the years in the UN, including of what they call a child sex ring run by Sri Lankan peacekeepers. And given that the Sri Lankans are now being deployed again to Mali, I'm wondering what the vetting is, or what the And also there was a press conference today by Code Blue near the UN, at which they presented the fact, based on a Swedish journalist who went to Bangui, that the children who were allegedly victims of the sexual abuse by peacekeepers received virtually no help whatsoever from UNICEF. So they were highly critical of that. And I wonder, you were just speaking about UNICEF, what's the response of the UN system to these two damning reports, one by AP about 2,000 allegations of sexual abuse, and two more locally here by Code Blue about a failure to help victims?
Sure. I mean, I think I've seen the report, and it's clear that every single allegation of sexual exploitation and or abuse by UN personnel, be it uniformed or civilian, is appalling and should appall every one of us who proudly work for the United Nations. I think we're all clearly aware of the shortcomings that we have seen in the UN system over the years on how, whether it's the UN or member states, react and deal with issues of sexual exploitation and abuse. We do believe that we are moving in the right direction through various steps that have been taken very recently through the Secretary General's reports, steps that were taken in the last few years. It's never enough as long as you have one case. I think the AP report, we've seen these cases. I think every time anyone reads the testimony of a victim, it shocks us to our core. The Secretary General's new approach, Antonio Guterres' new approach, focuses on bringing assistance to the victims, putting the victims at the heart of our response. We're working on improving on how we track cases and how we monitor victims' assistance. There is a growing recognition of a need to improve the partnership that we have with member states, because it needs to be partnerships. We have seen, I think, in the last few years, greater accountability and greater willingness to partner from member states. I think we have seen greater transparency by the UN in the last few years that I've been here, in terms of trying to be as upfront as possible in reporting cases. We've seen member states increase the follow-through in terms of jail terms that were given to people who were found guilty, in terms of being willing to have court-martials in situ, like we've seen in the DRC, I think, with the South Africans and I think the Tanzanians, if I recall properly. For example, 11 last year, out of the 11 substantiated allegations involving uniformed personnel, we saw 5 jail terms, while we're expecting conclusion for 6 more. I think what everybody wants to see, the Secretary General, the member states, all those of us who work in the UN, I think especially my colleagues who work in the field, is to see justice for the horrendous acts that these people have, and often children, have suffered. But I think if you look at the SG's latest report, if you look at already the fact that we're already using the trust fund, which is slowly getting more money, that we'd like to see more, there is a greater and refocused focus on the victims. I think the Sri Lankan case that was outlined in Haiti was some years ago. Overall, currently, in terms of Sri Lankans, they contribute about 500 peacekeepers, uniformed peacekeepers, mostly in UNIFIL, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic. They have currently no major contributions to MINUSTA, and they go under, obviously, the human rights screening and the increased screening that we have seen being implemented recently.
One quick follow-up on that. The Swedish journalist who spoke at the Japan Society said when she went to do a show, basically it was about Compass initially, and then she tried to speak to some of the alleged victims of the abuse, and one in particular that had a child from a peacekeeper, said that the UN system told her not to speak to journalists. And I just wanted to know from this podium, is that appropriate? Is that the
No,
UN's position?
I mean, obviously I don't have the details of the case. I have no reason to doubt the veracity, but it is clearly not United Nations policy to tell anyone, especially a victim, that they should not speak to the press. Evelyn.
Yeah, just to, the AP story concentrated mainly on Haiti, also mentioned Uruguay as an offender. Has the UN done anything in Haiti specifically?
They are looking, obviously, there have been improvements in tracking paternity issues. We are also looking how to best ensure that victim assistance is followed through while the mission transitions out of a more peacekeeping mode to a more political and support mode. Wait, and then,
on sexual abuse, quick follow-up. Could you please remind us what kind of assistance the UN was giving to the victim, or UN supposed to give to the victim, since the report came out in 2015?
You know, in the CAR, after allegations came through, UNICEF, through its local partners, gave assistance to victims in terms of often non-food items, psychosocial following, psychological following. There is the protocols in places that the victims are to be followed. The trust fund is there to address some of the gaps that may exist in the services that are provided. And so the trust fund, which has about $436,000 currently, we have plans to use about $225,000 in 2017, which will identify service gaps in the support services that victims are supposed to get.
Based on the report that the Sweden journalist just showed at the Japan Society, the UNICEF representative in Central African Republic confirmed that right after, a couple months after, they lost the touch with the kids. So how do they...
I think the system as a whole needs to improve. I don't have the details of the particular case. What we do know is that the victims are meant to be followed to ensure they get the proper support. Yep. So, and then, hold on a second, Masood. Yeah, go ahead. No, 1 second.
Thanks. Given that peacekeeping and the effectiveness and future of it is the focus of the program of work of the Security Council this month, do you have concerns about how these reports will affect the outcome of those discussions?
Okay. I think the concern that we have is to make sure that all the victims get the support that they can. That's our primary concern. It is clear that in all these kinds of cases, you know, one or two cases, which is 1 or 2 cases too much, can have a huge impact on the perception of peacekeeping and the effectiveness of peacekeeping. The first tragedy is what happens to these girls and these boys and these young women and young men, and the suffering they've had. And also the fact that the actions of very few has such a negative impact on the positive and tremendous work that the vast majority of peacekeepers do every day, day in and day out, who put their lives on the line and try to keep peace when often there is no peace to keep. So we need to address the problem first for the victims, and then also to ensure that the perception of peacekeeping is not a wrong one. Masood, and then Sonia. Go ahead. You yield to India.
Give it the, yeah.
Go ahead.
Give it this. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pakistan has sentenced an Indian national, he's a naval officer, to death. He was charged with espionage and sabotage. But India has reacted strongly to it, saying that the due process of law and justice was not observed in this case. The person's name is Kulbhushan Yadav, and that India will consider it as a premeditated murder, to quote it. So, and the fact that, as I said, the due process of law was not observed.
We're not in a position to judge the process or to have a position on this particular case. Overall, in terms of relations between India and Pakistan, I think we continue to underline the need for the parties to find a peaceful solution and to engage through engagement and dialogue. Masood.
Thank you. Stéphane, on this situation that is between Syria, the situation has become bad to us, and now it seems that Mr. Trump is going to get involved in North Korea. And that seems like a nuclear sort of a thing about to happen. What is it that the Secretary General can do to alleviate, at least somehow bring some sort of temperance in the situation? As at this point in time, China is telling Mr. Trump that this should be resolved to peaceful. So Mr. Trump is saying that either it's going to be my way or the highway. So what is going to happen?
Obviously, we would like to see any point of tension around the globe, regional tension anywhere, resolved peacefully through dialogue. As for the your particular question, I will quote the Secretary General, who says, I will not comment on things that have not happened, because the more you talk about things that have not happened, they may happen. Mr. Klein.
Okay. Well, just a quick reaction to that. I thought this Secretary General is all about preventive diplomacy.
He is, but I think I was referring to Masood's attempt to have me comment on what the President of the United States has said in specific quotes. But what I would tell you is that obviously we want all these tensions to be addressed through dialogue.
But might he see a role for himself?
I think the role for, any time there is a dispute, the role for the Secretary General is really focused on being asked by the various parties to get involved. Obviously, this is something he may speak to different parties bilaterally, but there is at this point, no formal role for the Secretary General.
Okay, and the question I wanted to ask is, with the focus on peacekeeping this month, is there any plan in the near future to have the new USG of DPKO, Mr. Lacroix, to come speak?
There's no plan, but I know I've spoken to him, and I know he's keen to come out at some point and meet all of you.
But does he have any comment that you are aware of, or reaction that you're aware of efforts spearheaded by the U.S. To significantly reform and perhaps cut back on
I think his comments are, his opinion is that of the Secretary General, as Secretary General expressed in last week, I think on Thursday afternoon in the Security Council, and the Undersecretary General's role is really to implement, to share the Secretary General's vision and to implement it. Awesome. Oh, and then, sorry, we'll let Oleg, who's been very patient, who is here slightly before you.
Thanks, Stéphane. With the appointment of Virginia Gamba as SRSG on Children in Armed Conflict, who's going to take her place as the head of JIM? I'm sorry if you mentioned it in the...
No, I did not mention it. I will get you something on that. But it doesn't. The work of the JIM will continue as needed. Ross.
How long was the planning to nominate Ms. Gamba to the new position in the works?
I guess since I'm not really sure I'd answer your question. There were a number of candidates. She was interviewed and she was chosen. So the job was, I think you could say it was posted, since the job was posted on the Secretary General's website a few weeks ago. She decided to apply as, I think, we all have jobs, and we all decide sometimes to apply for other jobs, and sometimes we're lucky enough to get them.
Was there any effort to dissuade her from leaving her current post, given the importance of the work?
I think
or
the,
no?
the importance of the gym continues. People switch jobs all the time. The structures remain, and the structures remain at work. Masood and then Mr. Lee.
Yeah, Stéphane, just wanted to. This question has been asked again and again on the legality.
Has it been answered again and again?
Yes, sir. And you've not been able to respond again and again.
I have a feeling we're going to.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Yes, this is about the legality of the United States action in Syria, which was in response to the chemical attack in Syria, which is still not determined whether it was done by the Syrian government or the other operatives in Syria. So, without any determination whether who was responsible, the United States took the action. It has still not, United Nations legal department has not been able to come up with the definition whether it was legal or illegal.
We will not here get into the debate of legality or illegality. I would refer you back to the statement that the Secretary General issued on that issue. Evelyn, you haven't had a question.
Yes, the IOM had a report about migrants in Libya being offered to the slave market. Do you have anything on that?
I did yesterday. I flagged that yesterday. That's okay. Matthew.
One thing on Ms. Gamba, will she play a role in the upcoming report on children in armed conflict?
Well, the mandate, yeah. I mean,
when's the report due?
The mandate. I think the report is due in June, I believe.
Okay.
I mean, as I said, the report, just like the gym, the structures and the mandates remain. The people there staff, and they go on their work, and the leadership changes.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask, because I saw on the Secretary General's schedule that he swore in today Louise Arbour, as well as Mr. Lacroix. One, I wanted to know, I've been asked previously how big the Louise Arbour office is going to be, given it was through ACABQ they approved her position and a head of office, but nothing else, to my understanding. What is the intended size of the office?
I'll see if I can find out.
And is she beginning working with just one staff, or?
I think she may have some staff on loan, but she has all sworn in and ready to go.
And I wanted to ask you two questions about this Englaf Sang, previously John Ash case. One, there's been a now guilty plea by John Ash's lone remaining co-defendant, Jeffrey Yin. And in his guilty plea, he states that South News intentionally paid him in cash in order to evade U.S. tax laws. That's what he's pled guilty to. Given the supposed inquiry by the UN, what's the response? It's not a matter of waiting to the end of the case.
My understanding is South News is no longer accredited as a news organization to the UN.
Okay. My second question has to do with the Office of South-South Cooperation. It was obviously central. It's central to the case, and we haven't heard very much about it. Now, I've been told sort of that it's basically that there's the current head of it, still described as a new head after 18 months, that his deputy is also Argentinian, and that there's a move to get 2 deputies. And what I'm wondering is, it doesn't seem from people that work there that much has changed in the office. And I'm wondering, has there been follow-up?
The leadership has changed, and
was there ever a press conference in terms of what they learned?
You're welcome to.
I've tried
to contact them, but okay. Well, thank you. Yes, Evelyn, go ahead.
Just briefly.
You can use your.
The Russian delegate on Friday said that the gym was prejudiced against Syria. Has this gone to, or was not fair to Syria, needed a better regional representation? Has this gone to Ms. Gamba at all, or I mean,
I think the gym
it's
works.
Argentina, Romania, and Germany.
The gym and the joint mission is a body of the Security Council. I have no particular comment on what the ambassador said. Thank you.